G'day guys and gal, with the Horus Heresy finally over, we can begin discussing some of its late game plot points in earnest, the most random left of field one being the Dark King, the 5th Chaos God who was also the Emperor. It was bizarre, it was awesome, and it created some dope-ass lore, so I'd say it's worth talking about. Before we get started, I already know there's going to be some comments regarding the Wes Hammer stuff that happened last week, so I thought I may as well just talk about it on video one final time before I move on for good. Me publicly accusing Wes Hammer of copying some of my videos was not a cool, smart, or funny thing to do. It was retarded. I'm not really sure what was going on in my head, it was very impulsive. I think with how well things have been going in my life, work, and whatnot, my ego got a bit inflated and I felt untouchable. So when I saw Wes's latest video, it triggered me because I automatically just assumed the worst and just went into Semen Demon mode. Made that call out video within like an hour and a half and fired it off before going to bed. It wasn't well thought out at all. I woke up the next day already wondering if I made the right call and not feeling the best about it, but then seeing his response and the many comments, and then taking the day off the computer and phone to look at the situation from a non-ego driven perspective, I realized I just look like an idiot and that petty ego drama call out stuff is really something I don't want to take with me forward. The backlash was exactly the humbling I needed to knock me down a peg and help me see what actually matters. And what matters isn't video titles coincidentally sounding the same. I messaged Wes to apologize and I've really refocused my priorities. This year's going to be dope ass lore, hectic diorama builds, stay tuned for that, the hottest nude cosplay calendar, and maybe even episode 3 of Homebrew Adventures, and no more petty childish shit. I mean, the jokes aren't going to get much more mature, but the lesson has been learned. I'm going to move on, stay in my lane, and do what I do best. For those that continue to spam the dislike button or comment something salty, you're just giving the video views and engagement. So feel free to do that, but I'd suggest moving on as well. Wes has also recently replied to my apology and we've sorted it out. For those that called me an idiot but have stuck around, I really appreciate you guys, and I'm keen to prove that I'm still worthy of your time. For those that have left the channel completely, I respect that and I hope in time I'll see you again. Overall, a pretty fat major L. With that said, today we'll go over the lore of the Dark King, what exactly it was, why the Emperor was becoming the Dark King, what would have happened if he did, and what lore repercussions there are for its existence. Let's get into it. The Emperor isn't exactly winning any humanitarian awards anytime soon. However, as he is the most effective weapon against the literal forces of hell and actually does care about humanity, he is definitely a good guy in the context of Warhammer 40k. The saying absolute power corrupts absolutely seemed to be true for everyone else except the Emperor, who could guzzle down power like a nymphomaniac guzzles down infinite cock. It just didn't seem to change him for the worst. Even after Molech, where he literally stole power from the gods of hell and turbocharged himself before then making the Primarchs and becoming master of most of the galaxy, his goals and attitude remained unchanged. However, with the Emperor really wanting to kill Horus's ass at the end of the heresy, he began absorbing an absolute fuckload of warp energy into himself. The reason why he can just do this and not turn into a chaos spawn or explode is because the Emperor's very DNA is designed to be saturated with and control the warp. After all, the Sensei, the Emperor's biological descendants, are almost entirely immune to chaotic corruption and can use the warp risk-free. So the Emperor can take this even further. However, there is a limit, a point where if he absorbs enough power, he would have no choice but to ascend to become a new warp entity, a new chaos god. The Emperor thought that if Horus won, everyone was fucked, but if he became a god, he could beat Horus and then save humanity, not really realizing that the Dark King was the Chaos God of ruin, the destruction of all things, the domination of life. Just like how the birth of Slaanesh destroyed the Eldar and tore open the Eye of Terror, so too would the birth of the Dark King annihilate Terror and kill most of humanity. The Emperor just seemed to straight up think he could just handle it, although as he was ascending, he wasn't really seeing the damage he was already doing, with these nearby custodians getting burnt to death and then reanimated by his power. He was also able to cause mass destruction and ruin amongst the traitor forces by psychically invading the Chaos Realm that had been merging with real space during the siege, the Inevitable City it was called. Chaos was happy to let the Emperor become the Dark King. Originally, Horus was thought to be the candidate, with the theory being that upon slaying the Emperor, he would ascend to become the 5th Chaos God, as the Dark King had been prophesied to exist, but the truth was that it was supposed to be the Emperor. Now here is a titty twister bit of lore that I still don't know how I feel about, but lore is lore. Because the warp is timeless, whenever a new god is born, they have technically existed forever. For example, although Slaanesh was created only 10,000 years ago, her demons fought against the old ones 60 million years ago. For the Dark King, he already had at least one demon belonging to him and a realm of chaos to himself, almost like someone had prepared his home for him and all he needed to do was return to it. However, the event of the Dark King's birth had to occur for him to exist in the past, present and future, so if the Emperor was able to stop it, it would technically make the Dark King cease. As you can see, this creates a bunch of plot holes, paradoxes, and obnoxiously head-scratching lore, but it is what it is, and it's probably best not to think about it too hard. On the brink of his ascension, the Emperor was confronted by Alanus Persson, John Grammaticus, Leto, and Garviel Loken. Ol was the Emperor's oldest friend, a man who had nothing but integrity. Even though Ol once stabbed the Emperor because the Emperor wanted to gain forbidden knowledge, the Emperor never sought revenge and allowed Ol to live in peace. The shock of seeing his friend, in this place at this hour, really shook the Emperor. It knocked him out of his single-minded mission to destroy Horus, and he listened to his old pal. Ol told the Emperor that this wasn't the way. He was the master of mankind, not a god or a warped creature. He was a man, and even if he was to face Horus and lose, he would die a man. He told the Emperor to have faith and roll the dice one last time. The Emperor saw the truth in that, combined with his infinite respect for Ol, so in a mega blast of power, he released the Dark King and banished it back to the corners of hell. The power release was surprisingly a massive boon for the Loyalists, healing many of them from near death, banishing a fuckload of demons, empowering the Loyalists, and breaking Rogel Dawn out of his pocket dimension prison. Sure, the Emperor was now weaker than Horus, but he was going to play dirty, fighting like a man with everything to lose. The Emperor would go on to fight Horus in one of the most hectic slugfests ever. Both warriors absolutely turbo fucking the shit out of each other. The Emperor played very dirty and it was great, manipulating Horus, using illusions and tricks to gain the upper hand, before tricking Horus into releasing his chaos power temporarily, before then finally killing him. And yes, he got a lot of help from his buddies, but the mad lad did it. He rolled the dice and got a 20. Mankind would live on. But what if the Emperor chose to ignore Ol and ascend anyway? Well, it's hard to know for sure the immediate aftermath. For drama's sake, I'd say it wouldn't just instantly result in a massive explosion that kills the galaxy. I'd say that the Emperor would be on the absolute brink of ascension and then would need to kill Horus to complete it. He would do so, not with tricks and the power of friendship, but with overwhelming, unbelievable power. Horus would have his balls exploded, his bald head sizzled, before then getting embraced by total oblivion. The Dark King was also said to be a devourer, a consumer of warp energy, so there could be an argument to be made that the Emperor would then absorb the power within Horus to fuel his true ascension, causing a massive explosion and a new Eye of Terror to be torn open. Countless sextillions of humans would die instantly, with only the far-off world surviving. However, the Emperor would now have claim to all human souls, in a similar situation to Slaanesh and the Eldar. It's unclear what would happen to Guilliman, the Lion, Russ, and their legions. However, for plot's sake, I would say that the small sliver of the Emperor still within the Dark King would protect them from the explosion, simply knocking their fleets out of the warp somewhere random. The awakening of the Dark King would likely dispel all the warp storms in the galaxy, similar to the birth of Slaanesh, but with no Astronomicon to guide them, the survivors of the Dark King's ascension would regress back into another age of strife, an old night. The ascension of the Dark King was actually hoped for by Chaos, although I think they would come to regret it, as the Emperor would wage a vicious war against them, and he would probably win. The Chaos God of total destruction and ruin is a concept that is more powerful than Nurgle's plagues, Khorne's warlust, Slaanesh's debauchery, and Titsnitch's trickery. The Emperor would be the end and death of all things. With the Chaos Gods destroyed, the Dark King would ruin the mess of the galaxy for millions of years, until he too was burnt out as all things were eventually ruined. That's the main theory behind what would happen if he ascended. As you can see, it was a much better call to roll the dice against Horus in a non-Dark King form. Even if Horus won, the result would have arguably been better than the Dark King's ascension. There was also a note about how Chaos wanted the Dark King to bring Valdor, Dawn, and some other key loyalists over to Chaos as well, but I think that was just wishful thinking. So with the Dark King banished and the Emperor getting his crusty balls tasered on the daily by the Golden Throne, is the Dark King plot point finished? Is humanity safe from the god of its own making? Well, not really. The Dark King realm still exists, and Samus, basically the Lucifer of 40k, is a demon of the Dark King. It appears that in the current setting, the pocket dimension that Valdor is using to build up a mega army of custodians, winged blood angels, and supercharged clone blanks was actually created by the Dark King. That makes sense since Dan Abnett wrote both The End and Death as well as the Inquisition series, so it's cool to see some subtle links between the two. A massive theory is that the only thing keeping the Dark King contained is the Emperor sitting on the Golden Throne, suspended between life and death. If he died, the power of the Dark King would seek another host. If he was able to live again, then the power would probably try to reattach itself to him, kind of like how Horus was only able to temporarily banish the power of Chaos from himself. Maybe the Emperor can only banish the Dark King for a certain period of time. This would also explain why the Emperor has actively sabotaged any attempts to get him off the Golden Throne and return him to a flesh and blood state. Maybe his eternal watch over humanity and the constant agony it entails is something that he is voluntarily forcing upon himself for the survival of the galaxy. If so, that's metal as fuck. Either way, I don't think this is the last we've seen of the Dark King, and with the Emperor seemingly gaining more sentience and consciousness since the opening of the Great Rift, maybe it'll be the next big problem for the setting. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then subscribe. God knows I need it after this weekend. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.